Yes, welcome to the No State Project here on, it's just here in from the Fortified Compound in Mesa, Arizona, where we're streaming video live on May 3rd, 2017, episode 19 of the commercial-free Wednesday broadcast. Glad to be with you here. If you want to join the big show, you may do so. It's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. And if you don't have it on the recording, the code to get into the queue is 2020 with the pound sign. 2020 with the hashtag will get you in. You can also instant message me on Skype if you want to be on the show, or if you just want to ask a question for me to answer live during the broadcast here. And right off the bat, we will be live this Saturday. So definitely tune in for the LRN broadcast this Saturday. Same call-in numbers, everything. And if you're not able to make a live broadcast and there's something that you want me to discuss on the show, you've got a question, you can always email me at markstevens@mail.com. Funny thing, I mentioned there is another Mark Stevens who has a markstevens@gmail.com. Different guy, different anarchist. Quite a coincidence, though. So remember, it's markstevens@mail.com or markstevens@markstevens.net is even easier to remember. You can also remember to send me something at frankrizzle3 on Skype. You can also post something on the website markstevens.net. And I just got from Max in Alberta one of the stupidest things I've ever heard a ostensibly professional clerk of court up there in Canada, eh? Well, we've heard many reports of clerks being, pulling a douche move and not accepting paperwork. We've heard that. That's that happens. California used to be really bad. I didn't ever want to work in California because the clerks were so bad. I swear, I think they were pulling the micrometers out and measuring the font. And because we have had motions or demurs thrown out and were not accepted because the font in the footer, I'm not kidding. I am not kidding here. The font in the footer was one size too large. It was supposed to be a 10. Apparently, it was at 11. And they threw it out. They wouldn't accept it. I don't know. Maybe it's because my eyes just aren't that good, but I'm nearsighted. I've never needed glasses, right here. I just I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe they did that. But this is this really strange. I know. Well, Mark, you're just bringing out one example. It's not all of them. Thank goodness. So what Max is saying here, he's been on the show before. He says that he's on the 6th prosecutor. They've gone through 6 prosecutors with him. He said he spoke with him today after leaving 3 voicemails. He accused him of making pseudo-legal arguments. Pseudo-legal. We'll get to the pseudo in just pseudo-legal. Pseudo means fake. So what is the clerk of the court, Donald Trump? You are fake legal. You are a fake lawyer. He said that he was threatening him, that Max was threatening him. I'm getting shades of Joe in Hawaii over here. Because he said he was continuing, because when Max made the statement that continuing to prosecute absent facts and evidence may be considered as criminal behavior. So that now is threatening. I guess this prosecutor doesn't realize that Max doesn't have the power, the authority, to start a criminal investigation. Prosecutors do. That's pretty much it. So he goes on to write here that the Let's see if make sure I'm getting this right. Yeah, it is the clerk. They said that the prosecutor has to file his motions now. Think about that. The clerk of the court, an adult, is telling Max, who's a defendant, that the prosecutor has to file his motions. Yes, you heard me. I mean, he has proof of this. I almost don't know what to say to something like that. How do you respond to that? Absolutely one of the stupidest claims. I'm going to have to get some contact information because I'm going to have to call this clerk. I'm going to have to find out. This is it's mind-blowingly stupid. I mean, I actually feel stupider for having even discussed this. Can you imagine how desperate they have to be against somebody who's only asking for evidence? I just want the evidence the prosecution's claims are based on. That's all. The sixth prosecutor thinks he's being threatened because he's saying that prosecuting without evidence may be criminal behavior. The clerk goes ahead and says they're not going to accept his paperwork anymore because the prosecution has to file it. Somebody please tell me why in the hell a clerk would think that the prosecution is responsible for filing defense motions. Because, if they ever change the rules that motions have to go through defense motions have to go through the prosecutor, wow, it will be overtly a kangaroo court. Wow. Don't believe this. Mail it in to the presiding judge if you have to. Get the name of the clerk that made the statement. The date, the time that they did that. You gave them an opportunity to correct themselves. We always give them an opportunity to correct themselves. You have to do that. It's part of due process. They could always claim, look, things were going quickly, things were fast, there was a lot going on, they were confused. Had they been an objection, had they had an opportunity to correct the record, they would have. Just give them a chance and and then you send that to the presiding judge with a copy of the motion that needs to be filed. See, most of the time clerks are just glorified cashiers. All they're there to do is take your money. That's it. Just take your money. Let me move on to a call. So if you want to join the show, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399, and the passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. Or you can reach me at instant message me at FrankRizzo3, and we'll get you up there on the air. We have, looks like we got a new caller. I don't recognize the area code. It's area code 616. You're live on the No State Project. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I'm Rob. I'm calling right now from an undisclosed location, if that's okay.
Rob from undisclosed. That is fine.
Okay. Well, I got a story I wanted to share with you. In about towards the end of March, I was in Winchester, Virginia, and me and my girlfriend were planning on moving out there. We were going to start a business in the tourism industry for Washington, D.C. And while we were checking out this town, we found this apartment or this trailer we really liked, and so we decided to make an offer. And while we were waiting for the offer to get accepted and all that, we started scoping out the town. We ended up at this mall. And so we parked at the mall. I dropped a quarter in the meter, and we took a little 10-minute walk around the mall. The meter went to 20 minutes. And so we did this little walk and came back, and there was still 10 minutes on there, and we got in and drove off, and then we realized that we had received a ticket while we were there. And so I'm like, what the heck, why did we get this ticket? So we go to the police department, and, I had my camera and everything, so I recorded it. And I asked them, if they could explain the cause and nature of this charge, because I was certain I put a quarter in. I'm certain that it went to 20 minutes. And they directed me to go to the parking garage where the parking authority was located. And so I went to the parking authority and asked them to explain it. And of course, she couldn't explain it. She said, if you want to fight it, go back to the police station. You can fight it in court. So they're giving me the runaround and stuff. And while I'm talking to her, the parking authority guy comes up to me and he identified himself as the guy who wrote the ticket. And so I asked him point blank on camera, do I have the right to understand the cause and nature of the charges? And he said yes. I mean, he was very begrudging. He said yes. He didn't want it, he knew where I was going with it. And so I'm like, okay, can you please explain to me the charges? And he's like, well, if you want to fight it, you can take it to court. I'm like, well, maybe I don't want to fight it. For all I know, maybe I'm guilty of this charge. That's why I need you to explain it to me so I can know if it's something I need to fight in court or not. And of course, he didn't want to. And then, like a couple minutes later, the police are showing up, and and they come up and what's the problem? I'm like, well, I'm just trying to understand the cause and nature of this parking ticket. And so, long story short, he's like, well, you need to fight it in court if you want it. So basically, they're telling me if I want to understand the cause and nature, I have to take it to court. I can't understand the cause and nature before I go to court. And then they instructed me to leave. And I didn't want to leave because I wanted to understand the cause and nature. And so basically, long story short, me and my girlfriend both got arrested for trespassing on public property. And so they took me to jail. I went through the whole jail process. And the first thing they did when they brought me in for the first hearing was I challenged jurisdiction. And, I asked them, how do they have the jurisdiction to impose upon me? And they said, of course, their tactic. Well, you're in the state of Virginia, so we have the right to, hear this case. And of course, I knew this was nonsense. I even pulled your tactic out there. Well, I'm also in the jurisdiction of the Catholic diocese. Does that mean they have jurisdiction over me? And she didn't like that. And then I corrected her, the magistrate, and I told her, I'm well aware there are 7 elements of jurisdiction. Could you please go through each element point by point and explain to me how you actually have jurisdiction? And she just looks at me like dumbfounded, like, who is this guy? And so she just basically ignored that and let the officer testify against me. I objected, asked, does this man have firsthand knowledge of how the codes and statutes apply to me? And of course she said, yes, he does. And they failed to provide any evidence. So I ended up doing 8 days in jail.
Jeez.
On a misdemeanor because I wasn't playing along. And during that time, I was physically assaulted by the officers. I actually had broken ribs. I had to go to the hospital. I requested medical treatment while I was in jail, was denied that. Apparently how it works there, you're supposed to get on the phone, their little jail phone. You have this little account number you type in, and then you can make calls. And apparently when you want medical attention, you're supposed to call for medical attention. Well, somehow my number got all screwed up, and my call wouldn't go through because of the number they gave me, which I don't think they even really did anything to do. I think that was intentional. But regardless, I couldn't even make the phone call to get the medical attention. So their response was, then you need to fill out a request form and then wait 1 to 2 weeks for a response. And I'm like sitting here with broken ribs. And of course the whole time, I went into a second hearing, where they tried to push a lawyer on me. I told them, I didn't want to exercise that right, but I didn't want to waive it, And so he's like, well, you have to do one or the other. And I was like, no, that's ridiculous. First of all, I need to understand the cause and nature of the charges before I can choose a lawyer. I mean, if I want to choose a lawyer, how can I do that? Lawyers are a very specialized field. How can I choose a lawyer if I don't even understand the cause and nature of the charges? And, so the first hearing, he got first of all, I did make a mistake and I interrupted him, and I apologize for it. But you know how it is when these judges, they get in there, you ask them a direct question, they beat around the bush for 15 minutes trying to get you to abandon your question.
Well, of course, but I want to jump in here. Let me jump in here a moment, Rob. Why are you pushing so hard about the nature and cause of the charge of proceedings and not just hammering away at the prosecution's burden to prove? If you're going to be attacking...
I was actually doing both. I don't mean to interrupt you. I was pushing both of those issues very hard. In addition to the fact that the name Robert Homrich, which they're identifying as me, is actually the title of the Cessna KV trust fund.
Okay.
I'm pushing all of these
Okay.
issues, okay? I'm actually pushing, and that's what got me assaulted in the jail, basically, is because I wasn't playing along with the logical fallacy.
No, but you're bringing an unfounded claim. You have no business doing a set askew trust stuff. There's absolutely no evidence, and taking definitions from Black's Law Dictionary from 150 years ago about capitis de minimis does not prove that is how they're operating. You or no one else, Winston Shroud, whoever the hell is coming out of the woodwork on the internet, nobody has a shred of evidence to prove that they've created a trust. And if they created a trust, so help me, there will be and has to be a paper trail. So
Is that not what the birth certificate is? Is that not evidence of a trust?
How is the birth certificate evidence that a trust was created?
Well, there's an account number on it, for one, that you can look up on the stock market. From my understanding, I've never done this myself, so I can't vouch for it. But yeah, but right. Okay.
No one can show any evidence that the number on the birth certificate somehow means it's a bond that is connected to the stock exchange. You're talking about one of the highest regulated industries in ever. There is a paper trail. If they were doing that, there would be a paper trail that people could prove that, because they would be trying to sell them as some kind of like when they bundled mortgages up and collateralized debt. Well, I forget exactly what they were calling those things. So I would recommend that until somebody, you or someone else, can actually prove that is how they're operating and show the paper trail, stop doing it. When you do things like that, you give them an actual legitimate basis to ignore you, because you're raising, like what I'm going to address later, pseudo legal stuff. These things are fake. It's just like, Rob, what goes typically with this crap is a completely fabricated Supreme Court decision that says governments, being artificial entities, can only interface with other artificial entities. So that they think it's completely fabricated. The entire thing was made up. Almost every single word it was fabricated. So I address this every time it comes up, and I would recommend don't ever do that. It's more than sufficient for you to take what they're actually arguing against you, something you can prove, and ask for evidence of that, than to bring out these things that people thought up to scam people in the 90s.
Okay. Well, as far as I understood, and perhaps you're right, if I was wrong in my understanding of that, but I was under the understanding that the birth certificate itself was evidence of that, and so I don't want to. I think that's a whole other road. I don't think we even need to go down for this program. But I just want to emphasize. I just want to explain to you why I did that, because you asked to address your question. That's why I did it. But the point is, I was throwing a lot at them, and they obviously didn't like it. But of course, I was definitely applying the Socratic method of show me evidence that the laws and statutes of the state of Virginia apply to me, simply because I'm on. In fact, I even, the magistrate even admitted on the record of that first hearing that because I was in Virginia, they had jurisdiction over me. And of course, I challenged that with the notion, with the Catholic diocese, and then I also made it a point that I was well aware there are 7 elements of jurisdiction. Could she go through point by point and demonstrate how explain to me how she could claim to have jurisdiction? And she didn't even address that. She just went on like I didn't even ask the question at all.
Well,
and so
we have time. We have time here. I'm going to write 1 through 7 down, and I want you to tell me what those 7 elements are, and then I'm going to ask you for the basis for that, to prove that that's an element of jurisdiction. So let's go. What's 1?
Well, in all honesty, I couldn't do that right offhand, right? But I do have legal documents that in a courtroom setting, I would come in prepared with that. I didn't know there was going to be a pop quiz, so unfortunately I didn't study for it.
Can you give me?
I really couldn't.
What can you give
I really
me?
couldn't answer that question off the top of my head.
Can you give me any of them?
Well, I know that they need to have personam jurisdiction. They need subject matter jurisdiction. I know they need territorial jurisdiction. I know those are the big three.
Those are the big three. Okay.
And of course, I'm not disputing territorial jurisdiction. I'm not even necessarily disputing the subject matter jurisdiction. But of course, the personam jurisdiction is the big one. I mean, that's the one that gives them authority over me, the living man.
Subject matter jurisdiction, there were all three of them, I did a whole video about this, all three of them are tied to exactly the same thing. They're all tied to the Constitution. The Constitution is the source of their alleged jurisdiction. Personal, subject matter, territorial, and in rem. So in rem is one of them also, but that's not an issue with you here that we know of. So I believe that all three, especially personam and subject matter jurisdiction, you should be hammering away, because the personam jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, of course, are based on the Constitution being applicable because you're physically in Virginia. That's their claim. We know that's their claim. They'll tell you that. So,
well, it's going to get more interesting when we get further, but go ahead. Sorry.
But I just want to point out, though, that they're charging you with a code violation. They're charging you with a violation that they created. It's not a crime or an offense by its nature. It's only an offense because some politician said so. So to have subject matter jurisdiction being the legal injury and damage, obviously there's no damage, but to have a legal injury is still hinging on whether the Constitution applies because you're physically in Virginia. So don't discount the subject matter and personam jurisdiction, especially since subject matter jurisdiction can't be waived, but you can waive personam jurisdiction. Personam jurisdiction can be waived. So keep that in mind. Subject matter jurisdiction is extremely important. So the point about jurisdiction, personal jurisdiction, it still goes directly to the subject matter jurisdiction because they don't have a crime unless the Constitution applies to you. So it's an element of jurisdiction. It's also an element of the charge, which is why they can't ever show subject matter jurisdiction in these maloprohibited cases.
Sure. Well, anyway, let me kind of continue because it gets a little bit more interesting because, as I said, I did 8 days on the most piddly misdemeanor charge you can imagine. And while I was in there, as I said, I was assaulted. My girlfriend was also arrested. They told her, and I quote, "You're guilty by association." I mean, she didn't do anything. She was holding the camera. She hardly said anything at all. But anyway, she got released a little earlier because she played along because she doesn't study the legal stuff quite in the depth that I do. So she didn't really quite know how to make a defense to it all. But because I was, raising these legal arguments, they first of all, they wouldn't put a bond. They wouldn't issue a bond for me. And, of course, while I was in there, I was coerced by several of the detention center employees, including their psychiatrist. I had a psychiatrist. They threw everything. They strapped me into a chair. They threw me in the suicide cell. I was never suicidal. I was never combative with them. But they really wanted to make an example out of me.
Well, yeah, because you were using all the buzzwords for that throws up all the red flags that they think they're dealing with a lunatic. They've been told that sovereign citizens and freeman types are lunatics. They're crazy. They're extremely dangerous. They are domestic terrorists. They are the number one threat, domestic terrorist threat against law enforcement. So this is why I spend time debunking that stuff. And the reason why I didn't, when I asked you to list the 7, I want to impress on you and everyone listening that if we're going into court, we damn well have to be prepared. And so these are things that we should know.
Right, but the problem was I wasn't able to be prepared because they took me right off the streets and put me in jail and brought me in front of this judge. I didn't have access to a legal library or any of that stuff. I just had the knowledge I brought with me on the spot. So
okay, well, I can appreciate that. But for those people who are listening and researching this stuff, keep in mind, you may wind up in court because of that stuff. One, we're never going to do the sovereign citizen freeman on the land crap. We're going to all we're going to do is we're going to take the prosecution's claims and we're going to hammer away at that burden of proof. That's what we're going to do.
Sure.
So,
and they accuse me of being a sovereign citizen, and many times I pointed out the contradictory nature of the term. And it clarified I'm absolutely not a sovereign citizen by any means.
Yeah. See, the benefit when I do it, when people here at the No State Project, when we do that, and then we get accused of that, or I get accused, and people think I'm a sovereign citizen, that people who are friendly to the show, which blows my mind. I just did a whole segment about that not too long ago, and but when we're accused of that, and they say you know, we can ask them again. We're just asking questions. What sovereign citizen arguments am I making? What kind of claims do you think am I making that would fall under sovereign citizen? Yes, and that's the thing. We're not making an argument. The only argument we'll make is that they don't have evidence. And if they're going to disagree with us, okay, put the evidence on the table. But usually the sovereign citizen types are making legal conclusions and legal interpretations, such as what some of the ones that you've mentioned. Oh, the birth certificate is a bond, and it's so you know, that the all caps name isn't me. They're saying things, and I want to point out too, it goes against the Socratic method, and it assumes a burden of proof that even if you're right in the things that you're saying, you have no business raising them when you should be attacking the burden of proof of the scumbag cops and prosecutors that are making these claims against you.
Right, and I get that now. I see your point there. But so anyway, I'm in jail. They're playing hardball with me, and while I was there, even the psychiatrist, among other employees, coerced me and saying, I realize you know some legal stuff, you got some knowledge, but unless you hire an attorney, you're not getting out of here. That was their coercion tactic. And after about 8 days of this and realizing I need medical attention and I'm not going to get it here, I finally gave in, and under duress, I agreed to take the attorney. And this was after the first hearing, where I said, I don't want to waive the right, but I don't want to exercise it either. I want to understand the cause and nature of the charges before I can even make a determination whether I need a lawyer or what kind of lawyer what kind of specialized lawyer I should hire. So long story short, after all of this, 8 days finally go by, and I finally gave in and allowed them to appoint me an attorney. And this was under duress, and I totally had every intention, even when I said it, that I was going to rescind it as soon as I had the opportunity, which is where I'm at now. But the attorney they assigned me is a real piece of work, because he started taking on the burden of, because I asked him, can you show me the law, or show me the evidence that the laws and statutes apply to me simply because I'm on the landmass, as the magistrate claimed. That was her claim. I need to see the evidence of that, because that's the basis of this whole claim and how the applicability of the laws. And he came up, and I've got it right here. Let me see if I can dig it up real quick. He cited, because you're always asking for this, and this was what he gave me. It's I believe it's a Virginia statute 16.1-123.1, criminal and traffic jurisdictions of general district courts. And you want me to read this through? Yeah, I can.
I have a pretty good idea what it says.
Mumbo jumbo.
And what he's doing is he's presuming that the Constitution and laws apply to you just because you're physically in Virginia in the first place. He's presuming the prosecutor's argument is true.
And of course, these are arguments that the laws show me the evidence. Well, he of course he's of the position that they don't have to provide that evidence, and these are frivolous arguments that I want to make. And so here's my little catch. Here's my little monkey wrench that I threw into the mix. Okay, first of all, they forced this lawyer on me. I didn't want a lawyer. They forced it on me, told me I wasn't getting out until I got a lawyer. So now here's my thing. I have a right to an attorney. Yes? Okay, well, why won't that attorney take the case in the direction I wish to take? Who's in charge here, the attorney or me? Because he's not willing to make these arguments. And if he's not, okay, fine, step aside. I'll need a new attorney who's willing to make it. And, of course, we both know there's no attorney in his right mind is going to make these arguments. But I have a right to an attorney, right? Well, do I have the right to move the case in the direction I wish? And do I have the right to instruct that attorney to do so?
Well, you have a right, supposedly, to assistance of counsel. Now, he's not acting as an assistant. He's acting as counsel to, you know, and you're the one who's assisting his own defense. So you could have him go as standby or get somebody else as standby so that they can help you out with objections and whatnot. What I want to address too is what he's saying, these frivolous arguments. I would always say, you're telling me the prosecution can actually argue without evidence. Isn't that the very definition of a frivolous argument, though? To argue an argument with no basis in fact or
Sure. Well, that lawyers don't use logic. I asked them, you know, okay, first of all, I need clarifications. In order to interpret this code you're throwing at me, I need to understand specifically what the state of Virginia is. And he defines the state of Virginia as the state of Virginia, which, you know, then we get into that circular logic again.
Why are you asking him to do? Well, this is not just for you; it's for people who are listening. I would not get into that. I would stick strictly with the evidence the prosecution relies on, and the witness with personal knowledge. That's what's interesting is that they said earlier that these cops had personal knowledge that the Constitution Code applied. I'd like to see that on the stand.
And they said that on the record too.
Yeah,
they said that on the record.
Well, now,
and that's what I am holding them to that. But I'm also questioning the grammar. For example, he justifies the arrest claiming I was aggressively arguing, and I looked up the legal definition of aggressive, which is to say an unjustified argument. Which, first of all, I was justified. I had permission directly from the police department that I could go to that garage, and now they're claiming I was trespassing. But before I went and stepped foot into that garage, they instructed me to do so, and that's on camera. So he justifies it saying I was aggressively arguing, and aggressive is defined as unjustified, and it also refers to threats or use of force, which in no way was I threatening. Did I make any threats or use any force? In fact, the only one who was aggressive in that garage was the police officer. They're the ones making the threats. They're the ones using the force.
Sure, and this is why comes up many, many, many times. If we are just asking questions for the evidence their arguments are based on, and we do not put forth an argument ourselves, then we can ask them point blank. I've had to do this with the IRS 1,000 times, and that's not an exaggeration. What argument do you believe I'm making, sir?
Exactly.
And they're not going to be able to present one because to that point, I've only been asking questions. And that's what I'll be able to ask them. So I'm not actually arguing with you. I'm asking questions. And that's where you get into this thing, well, questions can be argumentative. Well, that doesn't make it an argument. It's still a question. And I can't stand this idea that if I'm asking questions like I'm doing on a cross-examination, that somehow a witness is not required to answer the friggin' question just because some lawyer says it's an argument. Learn some English. Exercise some good faith, for heaven's sakes. Asking questions is not an argument, and anyone who says so is an idiot. They're either an idiot because they don't understand the word.
Questions leads to answers, and they don't want to provide you with those answers.
That's the issue, yes. But what I'm saying is that the people who continually insist that my asking questions is an argument, frivolous or otherwise, is either an idiot or that they are dishonest because they're lying. Questions are not arguments. We're asking questions which we can use the answers to then bring an argument and make an argument. But for goodness sakes, it's like these people aren't even literate in the English language.
Well, that's the whole point I was trying to make is like before I can enter a plea, a knowing involuntary plea on my own behalf, I need to understand what it is you're trying to say I'm guilty of. Because if you're saying I'm guilty of trespassing, first of all, explain this to me. That's all I'm asking, for clarification. Like, for example, I don't want to skim over what is the state of Virginia because I really think it's relevant. If they're saying that because I'm on the landmass or because I'm in Virginia, the laws apply, well, I think it's very relevant to have them clarify what is Virginia and how does one gain entry into it.
Well, you brought it up earlier about territorial jurisdiction. They will very explicitly tell you that your physical presence in Virginia, not the state of Virginia, they will actually tell you your physical geographic presence in Virginia means the laws apply. And then we want evidence that is true. It's just getting into what the state is takes more time than we have available to us. So we have to go right for the throat. We used to say things like that, but we don't have the time to do that. They just don't. I want to point out that if anybody wants more evidence that we are treated, that they look at you literally as an animal, that you're okay, go to jail. Because here you've got broken. Yeah, they don't. If you want to see psychopathic behavior in action, get arrested on the most petty offense and see how they treat you on the inside. They treat you as less than an animal.
Absolutely.
So you've got this lawyer that is there that you've been forced to. Have they forced a plea? Did they plea for you?
No, I have a plea scheduled on the hearing scheduled on the 28th of June. So I haven't gotten that far in the process yet.
Well, what I would recommend...
I've been playing with the lawyer a little bit. I got to admit, I've been just to feel him out and just to see how he's going to respond. And it's ironic because he's literally bearing the burden of the proof for the prosecution. And I pointed that out to him. I've got him on record admitting I'm not going to get a fair trial and that the courts are corrupt. If that's not a conflict of interest, my own attorney won't even. And then furthermore, he won't enter the motions that I want him to enter, which, obviously the big one would be, show that the laws and statutes apply. I mean, how can you enforce it on me if you can't even show that it's applicable?
Right. Well, did you file the discovery request yet, the Brady request?
I have not filed anything at this point. I'm still... For one, I was hoping he was going to get it dismissed because I was hoping I was going to make these arguments and he would just pass along to the prosecution that, he's going to make some valid argument that you're not going to be able to answer. It's probably best to just let it go. And I've been trying to push the issue that let it go. I already did 8 days on the most petty charge you can imagine. Yeah. I mean, if I had pled guilty, I'd probably get 10 days max. So, I mean, I've already pretty much served my sentence as far as I'm concerned. So I'm really trying to push the issue. Maybe I can get this asshole, pardon my French, maybe I can get this guy to work for me. And, of course, the first thing he said was, well, maybe I can get a deferment for you. And it's like, what's that mean? He's like, well, basically that means that you'll plead guilty, but there won't be any sentence imposed. And if you stay out of trouble for a year, pay your court costs and everything, then you'll be let off. I'm like, no, that's not going to work. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not paying. I'm not pleading guilty. And then, I started actually attacking the grammar and, trying, explain to me how he justifies. There's a video, mind you, of the whole incident. Can this officer show me on the video where I was, quote, unquote, aggressive? Because that's what he used to justify the whole charge to begin with, was saying that I was aggressive, when that implies that, first of all, it wasn't justified. I think it's more than justified to ask the guy, what's the cause and nature of the charges? I think it's more than justified when the police department specifically, deliberately told me on camera that I could go down there and question these things.
Yeah, so I think it had to do when they asked you to leave. I think the issue here, you had the problem in that the lawyer is not going to file the motion or the discovery request, at least the discovery request as I use, how I do it. So this guy has to if you want to be able to have these questions and your argument being that the prosecution doesn't have a shred of evidence to support their foundational claim of jurisdiction and of course, the
I understand. I do need to file that motion for discovery. That's an integral part of the position I'm taking.
You're not going to have any leverage for any kind of deal because they may actually throw you a deal just to make this go away, and then you could do that on your own. You don't need a lawyer to do that unless he used to work with that office before, so he brings something extra to the table. But that's your main problem right now, and so that's what I would work on. That if he's not willing to do that, say, can you at least be standby? Because if you're not standby, I'm going to have to get somebody else to be standby.
Right, and that's the other thing is I asked him if he had filed for discovery yet. I asked him if he had even watched the video yet, and he claimed he hadn't. It's like, well, how can you claim to represent me if you haven't even viewed the evidence yet? And he said, well, it wasn't included in this. He said he did file for discovery and it wasn't included. I'm like, well, that's really interesting because that was the basis of his evidence against me.
So he has a potential discovery violation, and he may not have done anything about it. Hey, arguing without evidence is prosecutorial misconduct, and not complying with discovery, yeah, that's grounds for dismissal.
Really? So how would I go about that? Just file a motion stating all of that?
Yeah.
Is there a particular name for that type of motion?
I would do it as a motion to dismiss, but how are you going to get it filed? Unless you're going to have to make sure, you're going to have to find out if this guy's going to go standby, because he's not going to file any motions that you're right. Not, right. So that's the best we can do right now is see if he's going to go standby so that you can raise these issues with him at your side to help with objections and whatnot.
Okay, that works. Anything else you might want to suggest?
I would say real quick, and I'll talk about this later too. Stay away from all that freeman stuff, that freeman sovereign citizen stuff. Yep. It raises a red flag with these people, and if you think communication with them is bad, it's 10 times worse when they've painted you that way, and they have grounds to do so because you're raising things like the birth certificate and the name in all caps. Stay clear away from that, and demand that anyone talking about that stuff, be nice and professional. Look, I want to see the evidence. I want to see the proof of this. If someone's saying that there's 7 elements of jurisdiction, then they should be able to list them out.
Right.
And
well, she didn't even want it. She looked at me dumbfounded, like, who is this guy and how does he know this stuff? Then she just proceeded as though I didn't even ask the question.
Sure, because 7 elements of jurisdiction that they have to prove.
Would that not also be a grounds for dismissal, though?
No, I don't. If you were asking a legitimate question and they refuse to answer, what you need to be doing, the judge has no burden of proof. None. 0. The burden of proof is on the prosecutor. That's why you'll hear me say every time, has the prosecution submitted sufficient proof to prove that just because I'm physically in Virginia, the Constitution applies and that there's any jurisdiction over me at all? It's always on the...
And I actually applied that direct quote at every hearing.
Oh. Well,
exact word for word. I mean, I've watched your stuff. I mean, it's been ingrained in my memory. I mean, to the point where I even, like I said, even use the... well, I'm also within the jurisdiction of the Catholic diocese. Does that mean are you of the opinion that the Catholic diocese has jurisdiction over me as well?
Well, I wouldn't say it the way you just said it there. You want to say I'm physically within the boundaries of the Catholic diocese. Does that mean I'm a member of the church?
Right, okay, fair enough. But, I mean, I'm just illustrating the point that, I mean, I'm very familiar with your work, the Socratic method, all of that. I've used it word for word. I mean, word for word. Can you show me the evidence that the laws and statutes of the state or Commonwealth of Virginia, whatever you want to call it, show me the evidence that the statutes apply to me simply because I'm in Virginia?
Yeah, well, good. But from now on, that's how you stick to that and keep to the prosecutor's burden, hammering away at that. We don't talk about any of this pseudo law stuff about name in all caps and set askew trust and other foreign sounding things that they use. All right.
Fair enough, and I see your point. I was a little confused on that one though, because like I said, I was under the impression that the document itself, the birth certificate itself, I mean, it's printed on bond paper. It's just like the title of a vehicle. I mean, just like property, title to property, if you will, and it has account numbers. I was under the impression that was actually evidence of the fraud, if you will. But I see your point, and that does shift the burden back onto me to make a claim like that.
Sure.
And I see your point on that. I just want to ask questions.
There you go.
I want to shoot him down by asking questions, and I get it.
All right. Well, Rob, I appreciate the call. Hopefully we got some good news next time you contact me. Let me know what the lawyer says.
Will do. I'm probably going to call him next week, or sometime this week, so maybe I can call in again on Saturday during your live broadcast.
Yeah, we'll be live Saturday, so let me know.
Hopefully I'll have some good news for you.
Well, yeah, we're looking forward to it. All right, appreciate the call. Rob.
Thank you.
Rob from Point Undisclosed. And, it does come up occasionally, and each time it does, I'm going to always point out. This show is about anarchy, and what we do in court is based on an anarchist perspective, a logical, objective perspective, not freeman on the land, not sovereign citizen stuff. I don't have any pseudo-legal arguments that I make or that I suggest that people make. I haven't gone into law dictionaries and used definitions. You'll see that there's not much of that. Saying my argument that there's no evidence proving that a written instrument from 1787 applies to me just because I'm physically in Arizona is based on evidence. It's based on a series of propositions and points of evidence, facts. Those facts are they're just men and women forcing us to pay them. That's it. No one bothered to sign these written instruments. Even if they did, it would only bind them, unless they had a power of attorney to bind other people, which they did not. Written instruments don't apply to people just because you say so. So there's a basis to that. That to be a citizen, according to the Supreme Court, what a citizen is whether they're born here or whether they're naturalized. Citizen is the same damn thing. The only difference is eligibility to the presidency. That's it. As far as I know, I think that's the only thing. That's the only difference. They are a member, and I'll put the citations here. Citizen is a member of the body politic owing a duty of allegiance in return for a duty of protection. These are reciprocal obligations, one a consideration for the other. Now, you'll notice reciprocal obligation sounds like an agreement. In fact, they even say that citizenship is supposed to be contractual. Well, the indisputable facts that they are men and women, and they force everybody to pay them, indisputable, beyond any doubt whatsoever. That is verifiable. I am not making that up. That is not a pseudo-legal argument. A pseudo-legal argument is if you are physically in Arizona, the Constitution, a written instrument from 1910, applies to you. That is a pseudo-legal argument. Not saying, a pseudo-legal argument is not saying written instruments don't magically apply just because you say so. That is logic. That is not pseudo. That's real logic. Oh, how do I know? Because they'll never accept that if I write something down on a piece of paper, it applies to them. Why? Because only the insane or the criminal think that that's true, that writing things down makes it true. The only thing that would be true is that I wrote something down, not the veracity of what I wrote down on a piece of paper, not that it applies to other people and creates obligations on them. Pseudo-legal is, because I'm a prosecutor, there's a double standard. I'm a prosecutor. I work for the government. I don't have to prove my claims are true. That is pseudo-legal. A written instrument applies to everybody because we say so. That is pseudo-legal. So the reason why there aren't any citizens and why these written instruments don't apply to anybody is because of those facts. And those facts are when you compare them to what a citizen is. Because are reciprocal obligations of allegiance and protection created? Are they created by forcing people under threat of prison or death? Are they created under threat? No. No. And you say, but it's legal for them. Not until after they already committed their crimes. Then yes, they went back and they said, because we forced all these people and committed all these crimes, we're going to excuse us. I don't accept that. Rational adults, honest people, don't accept that. It's like Lysander Spoon even wrote. Any band of thieves could just create their own rules and say, legalize their own theft. So that is a perspective that we go into court with. That's what I recommend. That's why we've been successful. We don't go in making these arguments. And that's why I say you should just be asking questions, because the only affirmative statement we should be making is they don't have any evidence. because that still keeps the burden on them. If they say, yes, we do have the evidence, well, then you're right back to your questions. What? What are you talking about? This guy even said they don't have to prove that. How many times have we heard that before? They don't have to prove that. It's jurisdiction. It's an element of the charge. Don't listen to these people that want to tell you law requires no evidence. Oh, law doesn't use basic principles of logic. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It may use different phrases. It like I mentioned with the objections, but they still stick to basic principles of logic. Go into court and raise a red herring. Go ahead. Do it. You'll get an objection on relevance. Go ahead. Argue without evidence. See what they do. Lack of foundation. Assumes facts, not in evidence. They're using basic principles of logic because you're supposed to have a fair trial. Fair. To be fair means it has to be rational. That the decision has to be rational. It has to be based on something. That's why when it's arbitrary and capricious, it is unfair, and is usually, if it's a decision, it's usually thrown out because it cannot be arbitrary. What the hell do you think it means when the rules legally, it cannot be arbitrary? Well, that just means it has to be based on legal logic. Really? Throw out a non sequitur in court. Go ahead. See how the prosecution responds. See how the judges respond. If you raise something that is illogical, if you raise something that's not rational, they're going to reject it. Not just because it's legal logic, it's not legal logic, but because it doesn't logically make sense. Legal logic isn't based on basic principle. Yes, sorry to say, for the most part, it is. What about a witness? They actually said to Rob that their witness has personal first-hand knowledge. You put that into your Brady request. You said you had a witness with personal knowledge of evidence proving the Constitution applies to me because I'm physically in Virginia. What's his name and what's the evidence he's got personal knowledge of? Why do they need personal first-hand knowledge? Is that just some archaic legal logic that was created by lawyers? First of all, lawyers aren't that smart. They're not that creative. They have to have personal first-hand knowledge because otherwise logic dictates they're not a witness. That's what a witness is. They have personal knowledge. They weren't just told something. Oh, that's hearsay. Personal first-hand knowledge. So remember, we have to know our both. You want to know the terminology for both of these things. You got to know the terminology, your legal objections, but you should also know the logic behind it. You need to understand the logical fallacies so you can recognize when someone's talking out of their butt, which people do most of the time. Especially when you're talking with a lawyer. They don't have to prove that. Wow. So I'm allowed to argue without evidence? I can make claims that I can't prove? No. You do. Not only do you need evidence to prove your arguments, Mark, if the prosecution makes a claim and they don't need evidence, you need evidence to disprove it. That is one of the biggest clues that you're dealing with a crook. And that's what we're talking about here. We're taking this from an anarchist point of view because they are crooks. It's not just to get tickets thrown out. It's showing for everyone watching, for when we post on YouTube. They're exposing them as the crooks that they are. Mark, they'll never accept that. Well, first of all, we have gotten a lot of stuff thrown out. So they'll never accept that doesn't hold any water. Two, they don't have to. Even if we get it thrown out, they don't have to. We're just making it impossible for them to make it look fair. That's our job. More of the effectiveness of what we're doing comes out with people who see them for the criminals that they are and decide they're going to take the necessary steps to not comply with them as much as they are, to put their lives in such a way, to organize things so they minimize how much they have to engage the people called government and minimize how much they have to comply with them, such as organizing things and setting things up and structuring things right so that you avoid reporting, that you avoid licenses and stuff like that. That's the big thing. Not just getting a parking ticket thrown out, not getting a marijuana possession charge thrown out. It's the people that see them for the criminals that they are. So you see what happens with Ian from Free Talk Live regarding the evidence, in the DMV hearing. So you watch that, and you can see the prosecution not saying a single word in her own defense that she is engaged in prosecutorial misconduct. She went from court, where it was beyond a reasonable doubt, and took it out and filed it as a DMV hearing, where it was just preponderance, where she had a lower evidentiary threshold. So when people see Michael King screaming at me, I don't need evidence, people can see them for the criminals that they are. We are exposing them as criminals. So it doesn't matter if it's just a parking ticket, if it's just a possession charge, if it's just an IRS assessment. It's the people that see that now can see with their own eyes, and they can hear the agents themselves. This is not just a few bad apples. No. They are criminals. They can't even begin to prove that their claims are true. They can't prove these laws apply to anybody. That doesn't mean that we want to go out and hurt people. We want everyone to be subject to the same basic principle of do no harm. That using aggression is wrong, and not extending a double standard to people who violate that every day just because they call themselves a government. And they accuse us of pseudo-legal. Oh, no. It's not robbery. Government, pseudo-legal. It's not carjacking. It's forfeiture. Pseudo-legal. So just like what I was mentioning to Rob, we're taking an anarchist perspective on this. We are not accepting sacred cows. We are not giving them a free pass. And when someone turns around and says they can make a claim against you, and that a written instrument, damn piece of paper, not only applies to you, but creates obligations on you, and they say they don't have to prove that because they gave themselves a pass, you're dealing with a crook. And that's how you should respond. Why don't they have to prove that? Did the people who are actually forcing us to give them money, did they give themselves a pass? Did they make it okay for them, but not okay for us? And ask them, why should I accept that double standard? Isn't that just a fallacious argument? Isn't that a frivolous argument? You want to keep using the damn word frivolous? Fine. A frivolous argument is, I don't need evidence to support my claim, but you need evidence to disprove it. That is a frivolous argument. Throw it right back into their corrupt faces. I don't need evidence to support my claims, but you need evidence to disprove it. Fungal. We are showing, and this show is dedicated to bringing out how criminal these people are. So let them argue all day long. We don't have to prove that because you got a gun, right? Because you got a prison system. And you hit them with this. If I was to do things just like people call government, and I force people to give me force strangers to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? Get an answer to the question before they turn around and say, well, but government is legal. Do you have any evidence that their laws apply in the first place? Any evidence whatsoever? They don't have to prove it. There you keep making my point for me. Crooks. Damn crooks. Which is why all these logical fallacies, it's why they turn around and they don't want you to, they try to convince you, you can't use regular principles of logic in law. It's different. BS. Someone's trying to scam you. I'm going to use the logic of the Gambino family. I can't use regular logic to show that they're criminals. Can you imagine one of their consular, I think his name, getting up there and trying to say, hey, Your Honor, you're trying to use legal logic against the mafia here. And they use mafia logic. It's not a crime. It's called the numbers. Give me a break. They're crooks. And they're crooks because that's what the facts tell us. They force us to pay them. End of discussion. Crook. And if anyone disagrees, call the show. Show your evidence that overcomes the fact that they are men and women forcing us to pay them. That then proves that there are obligations, reciprocal obligations of allegiance and protection. Show me the evidence. I don't accept your double standard and this garbage. We don't have to prove it. No, you don't. We don't have to comply with you. We're a little over time. Appreciate everyone tuning in today for this May 3rd, 2017, episode 19. It's the 19th episode of the commercial-free No Stay Project. If you disagree with what I presented here on the show, you're more than welcome to call into a live broadcast or post on markstevens.net and set forth your argument, which includes your rational basis and your facts, and I'd be more than happy to address it. And if I'm wrong, I'd be the first one to post a video showing that I was wrong. But so far, no one's been able to show any evidence whatsoever or rational basis for why these rules called laws apply to us. We will be live this coming Saturday on LRN.FM, so tune in. And till then, salud.